So this is the AFS grant for shorts, and we can get started. Oh, and everyone knows where the chat button is there down at the bottom. Next slide. So for those who are new, and I see some new names here, the Austin Film Society is the organization that is supporting this grant program, and the vision and the mission are really, these 4 items, which is really to provide life-changing opportunities for artists. And we do that largely through our filmmaker support programs, which this team runs, the AFS grant being a very large component of that. Bringing the community together around great film. Hopefully all of you know about our AFS Cinema, which has reopened and shows and continues to show some really great work, both work historically, but important independent, new independent cinema as well. Providing access points and training for creative media makers. So this also goes to our filmmaker support programs, and in particular our community media programs, which offers classes and professional development that is housed at Austin Public for anybody who has visited that site on the east side. That is open to any of you to join and participate in, and we are currently open at limited hours right now, but that center is open. And being a catalyst for economic development in the region by supporting infrastructure and the screen industries. And some of you may know we operate the Austin Studios on 51st Street, where a lot of film and television is being made, and constantly work with partners around Austin and Texas to really create a great infrastructure and film economy here in Texas by kind of tying all the things that we're talking about, these 4 things together, we call the Texas film ecosystem. Next slide. So the AFS grant in particular started in 1996. So this is the 25th year. We've given over $2 million in cash grants and in-kind services to over 425 filmmakers. It's a really vital project, vital program. Richard Linklater, our founder, really wanted to make sure filmmakers had access to some capital to kickstart projects, as he was the recipient of a regional grant as well from the NEA years ago, where the NEA actually did more granting directly to regional filmmakers. So it was important in his career and wanted to see that continue for other independent filmmakers. The grant itself funds shorts and feature-length projects, and they can be in any genre: documentaries, narratives, experimental, animated. We have just wrapped up our features round, so we are in the shorts round. We say it's intended for emerging filmmakers. In this, we mean that a lot of folks who come to the AFS grant are what we would call emerging. Maybe this is your first project, or you're just really starting out in your career, but we do support and have supported filmmakers of all levels, but the majority of who comes to us are really emerging. But mid-career, even experienced filmmakers still come to the AFS grant when it's particularly necessary for them to have an influx of support at a particular time, both in their career or for their particular project. So that's important. It is competitive, maybe not as competitive as some larger national grants, but it's competitive to us. Here, we have some wonderful filmmakers, many makers in Texas. It is open to all of Texas makers, not only Austin. So we get over 200 applications each year. About 10% will get funding, and that really varies year to year. This year, we've seen an influx, or last year, we saw an influx of shorts applications versus grants. So we were definitely over 200 total applicants last year, but we're still able to fund about 10%. I think actually, in 2020, we had 121 applicants for shorts, and we were able to fund about 11 of them. And then if anybody is familiar with the Texas Filmmakers Production Fund, that is the same fund. It was just renamed the AFS grant. I can't remember when, but definitely started as the Texas Filmmakers Production Fund. So it's the same grant. Next slide. So again, we fund shorts and features. We've split the deadlines just to make it easier for our reviewers to look at and for filmmakers to kind of jump into the cycle. We used to only have one application cycle a year previously. About 3 years ago, we decided to split it. So we are in the shorts round, which is in the fall. And it supports production and distribution of short projects, and also our special grant, the Harrison McClure Endowment Film Fund, which we will talk about. And then the AFS grant for feature projects happens in the spring. Again, we have just concluded it, and actually we will be announcing grantees, I think, in the next week. And that supports development, production, and distribution of feature projects. And within that, there are 2 special awards, the New Texas Voices Awards and the North Texas Pioneer Fund. And our materials that we will release for this round will detail all of those things. So just so that you know that exists. And then we also have the AFS Travel Grant. A lot of people don't know about this, so we will talk about it today as well. And that happens year round. So next slide for the travel grant. Most people don't know about it, but certainly was not utilized well in the last 2 years because there wasn't a lot of travel for travel opportunities, festival exhibition opportunities for filmmakers. But we've had this AFS grant for quite a while. It is available to all Texas-based filmmakers. And the reason is to support travel for their participation in competitive film festivals across the country and internationally, actually. So we would supply $500 for participation in a North American festival, $1,000 for festivals outside of North America. There is a limit to how much you can get every year for a project. Basically, you could apply for up to $1,500 per project. And it is renewed every year, meaning like if your project received $500 one year, you can apply again the next year if there are funds available for the project during that fiscal year. What else to tell you about it? This year, we opened up what we call a special distribution grant for people who are making their world premieres at film festivals that were moving virtual. So last year, a lot of the big name festivals were doing virtual only. So obviously, because people were not traveling, we were repurposing the grant money to help support, final color correction and delivery of these projects to their online world premieres. And it was a one-time distribution. The details are on the website, so you'll find all these details on the website. We are going to continue to offer the distribution grant, knowing that some people are doing a hybrid model for film festival premieres, and some people are continuing to do it online. So the distribution grant is still available, but the distribution grant and the travel grant have certain festivals that qualify. And that we update those. We also change them year to year. So the current list of festivals is on the website. So you should please check those out. And again, you do not have to, you do not have to premiere necessarily at one of these festivals, but you have to have been accepted as part of their program, either in competition. For some of the festivals have a competition, some of them don't necessarily have a competition. And so those details are actually available on our website. But you don't have to have had any AFS grant support or any AFS support previously to your project either. So that's important to know. You could have, self-financed this film. It could have been a film that had nothing to do with AFS, and then opportunity has come and you want to take advantage of this film festival. You can still apply for this grant. And it's an online application. And part of the online application is proof of film acceptance into this festival. The director must be the applicant, and the director has to be Texas-based. And again, we accept applications year-round until all the funds are dispersed, meaning we have a set-aside fund, you apply, you get accepted, or we say we've run out of money for this year. And that's only known through the first come, first serve through the application. Questions about this specifically? again, more information online, but I just wanted to bring this up because it is part of our granting program. And now that festival opportunities are starting to open up more, we want to make sure you know that's available to you. So next, so we're really here to talk about this particular round, which the deadline is on Monday, September 13th at 6 p.m. Central, online application. And when we say short film projects, we mean under 40 minutes in total running time for your project. Next. So the AFS grant is composed of both a cash component and an in-kind component. So this, for shorts, you can apply for production cash up to $10,000, which will support the project in any stage of production. So that's pre-production, production, post-production. And then, or $3,000, up to $3,000 of support for distribution activities. There is a caveat that if you do get the distribution grant, travel grant, you cannot get the AFS grant for distribution, and vice versa. So that's something you'll see in the details of the instructions. Also, in this round, we are looking to award the Harrison McClure Endowment Film Fund, which is also a cash grant, and it's $2,500 flat to support an undergraduate student in a Texas university making a film that will complete a course or degree requirement. So if you're a student, an undergrad student, and this short project is for course or a degree, and usually it's a film class or film degree, but you don't have to be a film major, you can apply for this award. Next slide. And our in-kind grants for this round are from the MPS Camera and Lighting, and this will be a multi-day camera package of up to $10,000 is the award. And this would be arranged if you check off that you would like to be qualified for this award. You arrange the schedule with the company MPS once you are awarded this award, but it is a separate request. So when you're requesting what funds, you can also request the in-kind grant. They are additive, but they do not count against each other. So while we say you can only apply for up to $10,000 in cash, you can, in addition, ask for the MPS award. They do not cancel themselves out. If you were recommended to get cash and also recommended to get the MPS award, you get both. They won't negate each other. And there's no, I think people think, oh, if I ask for the MPS, then I'm not going to get the cash. That's not the case, and it doesn't usually happen that way. So I would encourage you, if you're in a stage where you know you could use the gear to help support your project, then you should apply for it as well. I see there are a couple of questions here. Let me try to catch some of these questions. Okay, can you get $13,000 to fund your project and get money for distribution? You will not get more cash than $10,000. So if you want to do distribution specifically, you would only be asking for $3,000. So the $10,000 is for any stage of production, a maximum of $3,000 for distribution. I think that hopefully that answered your question. Is the undergraduate fund for all undergraduates or juniors and seniors? They are saying rising juniors and seniors. That is the requirement of the grant. Can you use the grant to reimburse yourself for purchases you've already? Yes. So our grant does not necessarily have to be granted forward. I know there are some grants where you are projecting forward how you're going to spend the money from that day on. You can use it to reimburse expenses you've already incurred. And we'll show you a little bit about how that works in the budget. Great. And we are going to answer your application questions very shortly. Eligibility. So again, this is for Texas residents. So you have to be a Texas resident since July 1st, 2020. If you've been here much longer, great. Basically, you're going to say in your application how long you've been a resident. That's how we verify that piece of it. And then if we ask you for proof of that at some other point, we may ask you for that. But you are going to tell us how long you've been here for. The applicant must be the principal creative author of the work. And in this case, we mean a director. This really is a director fund. If you're a producer who shares ownership of this work, we would like the director to be the main applicant. If you have a co-director, great. You can list both people on the application. There is a spot for co-director. The main applicant should really be the Texas maker. Say if both of you are Texas makers, the applicant, co-applicant, great. Then it doesn't matter who's the main applicant. We will award to the main applicant or any LLC that you have designated for your project. But we will list both directors, if you have a co-director, in the award publications, and we would consider both parties to be awardees of the grant. Students attending a program out of state are not eligible. So say you are from Texas, but you are away at school at a different location throughout the year. In the spirit of this grant of creating an environment and supporting Texas-based makers, we would not allow students who are residing elsewhere for school to be eligible for the grant currently. So when they get back, you're more than welcome to apply. Projects can only receive 2 grants. This just means that if you have received a grant from us for this particular project before, you could actually apply again. Usually that doesn't really happen for shorts as much as it does for features, but you can apply twice. And the second time you apply should really be for a different stage of production. So we know that you're progressing in your project. And if you have received money for this particular project, you will be asked for an update. What did you do with the money last time, and how far did it get you, and where are you going with this second inflection of money? And it has happened. We have grantees who've received more than one grant for the same project, particularly, like I said, in the features round, which makes sense.
Erica, we have a question about Texas co-directors, whether they both need to be Texans.
They do not. So your main applicant has to be a Texas resident. But if you are both Texas residents, that's great too.
And then we had another one that goes back to MPS, whether you can request both cash.
Is it possible? Yeah. Oh, yes. So yes, you can receive both. You need to ask for both to receive both. They won't negate each other. So the cash award is actually administered separately from the in-kind award during the review. So your ability to have gotten the cash is not influenced by your ability to get the MPS award. Does that make sense? They're treated separately. So there have been times where you get both cash and the MPS award, or one or the other. But you can't get the MPS award unless you've asked for it. So make sure you check off that box if you want it. Be considered for it. Answer the question. Cool. Next slide. What's not eligible for grants? So particularly with shorts, this is important. So no commercials, music videos, no promotional, instructional, educational films. And this means as its primary goal. So we know, particularly for documentary films or other nonfiction films, you can use them in the instructional or educational market, for example. But if we are looking for films that are not destined for that market in its inception. So again, it's an artist fund, so we want to see some vision and creativity in the use of your artistic abilities. If it's used in these other forms later, that's fine, that's great, and it can be. PSAs are not allowed, and ongoing episodic work like web series and television shows. This is there's a caveat here, which is we know a lot of people are working on short films or short projects that may be part of a larger series. And that's fine. You can still apply for the AFS grant for shorts if the piece that you're proposing can stand on its own and can be exhibited on its own, as well as with the larger series that you have in mind. And the materials that you're presenting in terms of your proposal, your plan, the budget should only be tailored to that episode, that pilot, that short that we're talking about here that's going to stand alone. If you have in your mind, this is going to launch a larger series, you can write that, and it could be part of your proposal. But really, we want to fund the single piece of content that can stand on its own and be exhibited on its own, as well as if it goes to a series or is part of a series. Does that make sense?
There's one question here inquiring about experimental films and how they fit into the different categories.
Absolutely, you can. It can be in whatever form you feel it is more important to check off. So if it's an experimental narrative, a nonfiction experimental, we fund a lot of experimental films. I think the great thing about AFS Grant is that we are very open into the types of films that people are making, and sometimes support films that don't necessarily have kind of clear funding streams or a market attached to it, a distribution market attached to it at the end. So you can describe your film in the way you see fit. There's going to be a couple of boxes. I don't believe experimental is on there, but animation is. So you can describe in your project description if it's an experimental or not. Thank you for that. Next slide. So proof of Texas residency. So you're going to do two things with this. First, you're telling us that you've been here for at least a year, but you also want to tell us that you are a current Texas resident. And so we are really wanting to support people who are still here in Texas. So you need to submit proof that you are a current Texas resident, and that can be in the form of voter's registration, utility bill, university enrollment here at one of the Texas universities. We do accept redacted materials. We just want to see your name and a Texas address and some kind of current date. Only one piece is required. We do not keep this. We do not distribute the information you give us as part of your application packet. We just use it for our eligibility check. Driver's licenses and state IDs, we do not accept. We keep getting them, but if you come in with one of these, with an ID or a license, we'll immediately come back to you and say that we need something else. So please try to find some other form of residency. And if you do have a question, please ask. We are more than happy to tell you what we think we can accept. Scans for Texas residency enrollment. Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't have to be in any particular form. It doesn't have to be official with any official seal or anything like that. We just want to know that you're a current resident. Any questions about residency? Seems really clear, but this is the one thing that is always so challenging for everyone. Copies of your lease, the front, that's fine too. You're welcome to redact anything, and we're not sharing the information. All right, next slide. So a review process, just in general, people ask us these questions. There isn't a typical project, as I mentioned. We support all kinds of projects. Our goal with Awesome Film, the AFS Grant and Awesome Film Society filmmaker programs is really to foster diverse and underrepresented voices in independent film. Projects are reviewed by panel with different panelists every year. So while it's great to think that me, Marianne, and Max sit around in the back and make the decisions, we actually don't. We facilitate a process where people from inside and outside of Texas are really making the final decisions with our guidance and looking at our goals and our vision for the grant program. So good projects get turned down all of the time, and it's really hard. We give lots of good examples, but the Duplass brothers, they still like us, but they never got an AFS grant, even having applied before. And that could have been for a variety of reasons. But again, it's also kind of looking at the projects that may not get a lot of attention or have a lot of other funding opportunities outside of this particular opportunity. And it's not a huge sum of money, so we can't really distribute to as many people as we would like, obviously. Next slide. So again, 2 rounds of review. The first round is every application that we get is looked at by at least 2 people. And our reviewers are from inside of Texas. They are industry folks, former AFS, or I wouldn't say former, they are AFS supported filmmakers, film programmers from all over the state, film office producers. I'm trying to think of all the other people, studio heads, all the people that we enlist each year to look at these projects. And I say at least 2 reviewers, because if 2 people don't necessarily agree, it will go to a 3rd person, either another person in that group, or it will come to somebody on staff to also make the decision. The second round of reviewers then, we get the first round, everyone gets their information and feedback, and then we move a percentage of that to what we call the second round of reviewers, which are basically the panel reviewers. And the panel reviewers are made up of folks outside of Texas who are very deeply embedded in the independent film industry. So they specialize in maybe narrative or documentary filmmaking. They might be programmers at festivals like Sundance or AFI. So we enlist those folks. And these folks are really great to have, because particularly on the programming side, these are people who will be looking at your film further down the road and looking at like new voices. So having them look at projects early, even if you're not funded, is really beneficial, because they see projects, maybe it didn't come to actual final funding, but they're projects they get attached to or they really are excited about. And I've heard programmers who've been on our juries before tell us excitedly, oh, remember that film that we weren't able to fund that was on the grant panel? It finally came to us through the festival route, and we programmed it, and we're really excited to bring it to this, to Sundance Film Festival as an example. That's one of the Sundance shorts people told us the other day, the other panel. They were really excited about a project they had seen years ago. So it is really great that we enlist people from outside the industry, also to for them to see the kind of talent we have here, but for us to also get more connections out in the world with other filmmakers and industry folks. And then the panelists are the ones, as I said, who make the final decision about the recipients and the awards. Next slide. Okay, so the application, this is where we get into some of the nitty gritty. And then the question I see here is that, will we publish a video of the session? Yes, you guys are all being recorded now. Yeah, and it'll just go through this and the stuff that I'm talking about here. The website, kind of when you land on the page for the grant, it will look like this. The tips, actually, this doesn't look exactly like this. This is for the features, but it looks similar to this. Download and read the tip sheet first. You see that where it says 2021 AFS grant instructions. That's a really important document. It is basically everything I'm saying right now and more, but it will tell you step by step all the stuff we're talking about here. We also, on that reference documents, we have examples of funded films. So we'll have a couple of shorts examples there. We'll have examples of budgets as well. And then you will actually be applying online. So the application will never come to us. It will come through this online portal on the website. Next slide. And then, so just as you fill out the application form, just a couple of things. You must sign up for an account, particularly if you want to save as you go along. And I recommend that you do save as you go along, because there are a number of elements that you will be uploading. And you might be completing a lot of stuff offline too. So it would be good for you to kind of revisit your application as you go along. And do not opt out of email communications from AFS. If you have in the past, because you just got a lot of AFS emails, that will actually affect your notifications for notifications through the grant portal. So every cycle, there are a number of people that I have to contact. We contact directly because they don't get updates via our web portal. So just be mindful of that. If you've opted out, you may want to try to re-sign up, and certainly don't opt out when you sign up for this application portal. Name the form after your project so we don't lose it. And once you submit, you can't make changes. So you can save as you go along, but once you hit submit, it's going to go into our back end and we're going to start processing it. So you really can't make changes at that point. We just don't have the bandwidth to make those changes. If you're missing something, we'll let you know. And it's just the things that were basic requirements, like your proof of residency. So we'll turn it around pretty quickly and let you know that you're missing something. And then we're going to ask you to turn that around pretty quick. But we are not uploading new and improved documents. We're not uploading something that you realize was the wrong form. We're not going to be looking at it in that depth. We are just going to make sure that your materials are there and your links work. So please be diligent about when you what you're uploading and when you submit. And of course, if you run into a problem, there's like a horrible mishap that happens, please contact us at Filmmaker Support and we will get back to you and try to resolve it. Application components. The video sample is kind of one big application component and probably the most important, particularly in the first round, I would say. We're asking for up to 6 minutes in running time, no DVDs. We ask that they are downloadable links for this 6 minutes. If you have a problem with the downloadable link, please let us know. It doesn't have to be password protected, but we do want to have a downloadable link because we've had problems in the past with reviewers who can't access links depending on where they are, and also maybe not watching the same link because the link has changed on the back end by the applicant or something. So it is really important that you have a downloadable link at this point. Submit your very best work. Strong scenes, interviews, something that really exemplifies your strengths. One continuous video track. So while you can have a number of samples in that 6 minutes, maybe you have a couple of scenes. Maybe you have a couple of interviews or some, you want to show us a little range of your project or what you can do. You certainly can submit more than one piece of work, but it should be on the same continuous 6 minute track. Does that make sense? So edit that together if you can, if you're going to show us a couple things. And of course, there is a box to describe what we're seeing. So please use that box to describe it. You could say this is, these are scenes from 3 films that I put together for you. Everything's not color corrected. We usually know that, but you could let us know this is from my award-winning film. You can definitely use that to your advantage. And we say no trailers. It really doesn't help in film juries, particularly for, I would say, for funding juries. Trailers generally don't work. And if you ever go to other funders and submit work, they will tell you the same thing. Trailers are just not a great example of your work as an artist. They're always very specifically tailored to showcase a project and have a very specific editing style. So scenes, even if they're rough, tend to work best. And don't switch out or update your work sample after the deadline. Here's one exception. If something significant happens with your work sample, meaning here's an example. You are doing animation, but you're not at a point where you can show us samples of that animation. So you show us wireframes instead, but during the course of the application, you actually have finished animation, and that will absolutely help the jury see kind of where you're going with your project. An example of your animation style. You can tell us that you have an updated sample. And if we're still in process with the project and it's going forward into the next jury, we will allow you to submit it. So if there's a significant reason why that sample needs to be changed out, you can let us know and we'll make the decision on whether we pull that in or not. And sometimes it just might be too late, but we might say, oh, we know that this person has progressed in their sample. Or they're finished their film. They've actually shot everything. They're in they're in their third rough cut or whatever. And what you saw was just kind of an unfinished scene. So we might mention that in the jury, but they may not see it. That question, I think there's a video. Video samples of our works. Supply narrative content or just any video content we have produced. So that depends. So here we'll talk about this. choose something that will give us the best flavor of the project. If it's not from the actual project, because maybe you haven't shot yet, right? You might have done something similar in style or tone before, so you might submit that. So that would be a previous work. Or if you don't have that, it's just previous work about from you as the director. So we know that you have specific artistic vision, you've executed on projects before. So again, you get to describe what it is. Maybe it has nothing to do with the tone or format of the project you're proposing, but at least you can say, I have completed this work. It was successful. It went on, it was distributed. It went to this festival. This is what this is. If this is your first time, you've not really directed anything significant, you can obviously, here it says previous work from a member of the production. So this should be your key creative. It could be a co-director, a producer, it could be your editor or your DP, somebody who you're collaborating with creatively that will help you execute your vision. And that will help us understand that you've got the right people on the team. But again, you have to describe that it isn't yours, that it is somebody else's and who that person is on your team. If you never, so that's that third point there. Any questions about that? Currently working on animated shorts. Yes, so you do have to produce a 6-minute, that's part of the requirement. So some 6-minute piece, up to 6 minutes, it doesn't have to be a full 6 minutes. So if you want to record sketch work, storyboards, that would be best to have something if you don't have anything to show. But if you have, say, an editor you're working with and you want to show the editor's work, you could submit editor's previous work just to show who you're collaborating with, but you can submit actual storyboards in your additional materials. And we'll talk about that in a second. You also have a place for an additional video sample. This is not required. It's always helpful, particularly if you already have everything shot or in a rough cut. So they can be, the additional sample can be any length, full 1 track, same thing, has to be 1 track. And if you are using 6 minutes of your rough cut and then going to additionally submit the link to the rough cut, you might want to know that ahead of time, because what the reviewer will do is just not even look at the 6 minutes, they'll just go straight to the rough cut if it's the same material. So if you do have a rough cut, I would recommend that you submit it. The juror is not obligated to watch the whole rough cut, just so that you know. And likely what they'll do is they'll look at it up to a certain amount of time and then kind of scrub through to see kind of what happens to the middle to the end. For shorts, I would actually say the majority of our reviewers do watch the additional video and rough cuts because they're excited. They want to see more. So video samples are really important in the first round. So you'll have 2 spaces, the required 6 minutes and the additional video sample, just so you know that they're different. And then as part of the application, the rest of it is like submitting as PDFs. So we're going to go through some of these main components. Let's just see if there's any samples questions. Okay. So please use the naming conventions as recommended, because we will be culling all of your materials and we don't want to lose anything. And again, once you've submitted, you cannot edit or resubmit. Please don't resubmit. That just gets really confusing. But certainly if you are missing something, we'll let you know, and you will be submitting it not through this portal. You'll be submitting it directly to us. All right, next slide. Okay, so one of the key application components is your project description, and it should be about 1 to 2 pages for a short. This is really your pitch. Why is this exciting, special? How are you the best person to produce this? It should include your thesis statement about your project. You describe the production plan just briefly. It doesn't have to go in great detail. Again, this is just a description. Describe a little bit about your fundraising plan, how you're going to complete this project, with where are the funds coming from, and then where you hope it's going. we really want to make sure that you understand kind of we understand your goals as an artist of where you hope that this project will go. And that should all fit into about 1 to 2 pages. So be clear. We're really looking at feasibility of the project more than anything. So you don't have to be the best writer in the world. I know people are like, oh, I'm not a grant writer. I hate doing these applications. We're not looking for that specifically as much as how feasible your project really is to execute and what is your vision for your project, right? So don't get bogged down into all of the nitty-gritty plot details. Don't discuss things that aren't reflected elsewhere. So tangentially, if you had some ideas about, we may do some animated, or maybe we'll do some recreations, but we're not sure. It's confusing to see it in your description and then not see it reflected in your budget or in your production timeline, for example, that you're going to be doing. It just gets really confusing. So if you are things that are still kind of in your mind in development and you're not necessarily sure if it's going to come to fruition, you may just want to leave it out. Or you're going to have to build everything to support that idea throughout the rest of your proposal. And then show that you've thought about it from beginning to end. And really, that's why we're asking you about your production plan. You may be really early in production, and then the fundraising and distribution plan, just so that we know that you're thinking about your project through its whole life cycle. I think this is an important piece here, is why the grant is important to this project. Why is this bit of money in this moment important for your project? That really helps sway the judges, or have the judges understand, the impact the grant will have, particularly when resources are scarce and there are a lot of really good projects. Sometimes you just have to show why it's necessary in this moment, what's driving the urgency. It may be the subject matter. It may be just the time, the pivotal time in your project that could really use the influx of money to jumpstart or complete the project or jumpstart the project. So that's an important piece. And then have someone else read it. That's just I would always say that.
We have a question about applying for distribution only with a completed project.
You can, if you apply for distribution, you still have to fill out all of these requirements. So any phase of production or distribution you're in, we're going to ask you for all these same requirements. It's the same application. Okay, so the next big component is the budget, and there's actually it kind of comes into 2 places, which is we have a budget summary form that everyone should fill out. It's our form, so it's asking you to look at your expenses and your potential income or fundraising, and then you can submit your full budget in any way that you have it already. So we don't have a form for that. So when you fill out the budget summary form, you are going to talk about funding resources. They can be in-kind resources, stuff that you're borrowing, stuff that you're investing, potential funding sources. We do want you to present the entire budget. So you'll see that it's broken up into pre-production, production, and post-production. Doesn't matter what stage you're in, you need to project all of those things out. So even if you're in distribution, it's going to ask you for pre-production, production, and post-production costs, and you should reflect the budget for the whole thing through distribution. Same for if you're really early in your process. If you're in pre-production, we're still going to ask you to project what your full budget's going to be through distribution. And then make sure the math works. So we'll see the form next. Is the form there? I think it's the next one. There it is. So you see here, again, this is something you should download. And the left side are your expenses and your right side is your resources, and they should match expenses and resources. And again, a lot of it could be like anticipated, things that you're going to apply for, things that you hope you're going to raise, your fundraising goals for Kickstarter, as an example. I know that's all not solid, but this helps us understand where you think you're getting the money, has us thinking, how feasible is this? If your $200,000 is supposed to all come out of your credit card, I mean, hopefully that's a shock to you. when you start putting this together and you see that's where most of that money is coming from, is that feasible for you? Do the jurors think that's very feasible? So that's kind of how we're looking at this budget. Next.
Good question about what you do when you don't have information for a particular line or a row.
Great. Yes. So budget tips next. So again, we're looking at feasibility of the project, and this is for your full budget as well. So your full budget should be reflected. As you see, we have examples of full budgets on the website, but you should do some research, find other film budgets, see what the line items are that they generally are carrying in these budgets. Because what they're going to do is look for feasibility. They're not going to go line by line saying, oh, they're not spending enough for X. They're not spending enough for craft services. What they're going to say is, this is supposed to be filmed in 3 locations and there's not a travel budget. That's what they're going to say, something like, that's what they're going to pull out as a red flag. So make sure, again, that things are reflected in your budget that you've talked about in terms of your production and your vision. Use realistic numbers. So know what those rates are in your market. If you're going to be shooting in another much more expensive market or something that's a lot cheaper, do a little bit of research and you can find those numbers pretty easily. And then, will the grant make a difference? Again, when you say to me, this is going to really jumpstart our production because we need to find a location. And I can see that you're asking for money that's going to pay for your location scouting and securing certain rights. That means, oh yes, this money is going to go a long way. If you say, we really need this money because we have to go into production, but you have a big gap in the production budget. So production budget is $100,000 and you're asking us for $10,000. That's still a huge gap in production. This is not really gonna, could this jumpstart? Maybe, but you might need a lot more to jumpstart the production than $10,000 out of a $100,000 grant. So again, will this grant make a difference in where you're asking us to support you in your process? It's not going to make or break. It's not going to make or break your the jury's decision necessarily, but they start weighing projects they really like together, right? Like, so we have 10 projects and we really love them all, and we can only fund 9. Those are then they start thinking about those other things about each project. Can they wait? They still have money to raise. Maybe they can't wait. They just need to get it to the finish line, and this is going to help us complete that budget. Like those are the kinds of conversations that happen. Next slide. Project timeline. So you'll have a 1-page project timeline. It can be very detailed or it could be very general, like this right here. Just make sure you note the major areas of pre-production to post-production and distribution. They're looking to see if you're giving yourself enough time. And when we project, we'll see you in these stages. This can change for sure. And one reason we use this is like getting a sense of where you'll be with how close are you to finishing. Is our money really going to help support you to get to the finish line here? Also, something that I wanted to note is that we also look at projects for our other support services during the year, and we kind of get a sense of like who we can recommend for opportunities, both internal opportunities like our intensives, but also partnered opportunities from other fellowships and grant makers across the country. And they always say, do you know of people who are in post-production of a narrative film right now? And so this helps us get a sense of where you are with your project for those sorts of reasons. This could change. So by the time you get to granting, and if this has changed completely, that's fine. One thing that we do is have you update us with significant changes to your project once the award is given. And usually it does not interfere with us giving you the award. It's just so that we know we're kind of recalibrating where you're going to be in your project. Next slide. Okay, 1 page of your project personnel. So just small paragraphs about you and key creatives. It's the opportunity to show who's on your team and how they're going to help influence. If you're really early on and you don't have a lot of your crew crew secured yet, you can use advisors, you can use people who have been helping you creatively, mentors who know enough about the project, who've helped shaped you. But yeah, don't list anybody here who hasn't really been secured on your project. Next slide. So you have an opportunity to present a treatment or a script. A treatment should be up to 3 pages and should describe more details about your film. Documentary treatments have a little bit more in terms of theme, and if it's an issue-based documentary, more issues, topics to explore. Your project, narrative projects can submit a treatment rather than a script if you are early in your screenwriting process. But a script is great if you are in that place. It's not a screenplay competition. We do say this a lot because people, I think, are a little shy to bring us their screenplay. We just really want to have it in a good draft form, so it feels complete, and it doesn't have to be in its final form. So you can even say that. If you have a very long script, it is unlikely that the juror will read the full script. Again, they will read into what they need to read into and make sure that the dialogue and all the sort of vision kind of comes out on the script as you've described it in the project description. So we're just really using it for that reason. So don't worry too much if you don't have a very polished version of your script, and then you can make a decision of whether a narrative treatment is better than a script for you at this point. And then you have the opportunity to submit additional support materials. And the one that I think comes up the most is letters of support. So letters of support are encouraged, but not required. You can submit up to 2, and those letters need to come to you. So that unlike college letters of recommendation or fellowship letters of recommendation, they don't come directly to us. They have to come to you, and you should upload them as part of your application before you submit. So caveat there. And this should really be for somebody who's familiar with you as an artist, but also the particular project at hand. Maybe it's a mentor or somebody on the team who's really excited to work with you and can speak highly about the collaboration. And also, I would say, like, for documentary projects, it's really great, particularly if you're doing a character documentary, that maybe the participant sends a letter of support to say they fully participate with you. Or if it's about an issue, maybe an issue expert is saying why it's really important, this project. So those are some examples of letters of support. And it should, again, be both of you as an artist, but also the project at hand. Other support materials. So please be judicious about this because more is actually not always better. You can overwhelm people right away with more materials. They will feel compelled to look at your materials, even though they're additional. And the caveat is anything additional does not have to be looked at. They will more often than not, of course, because they're dedicated to the process and to find new talent. And so the material should really be useful in your project, in supporting your project. So back to the question we had earlier about storyboards. Yes, absolutely, particularly if you have nothing to show. So, if you have material already shot from a very specific location, or you have test shooting or scenes, you don't necessarily have to send us the storyboard as well, because we're already seeing it, right? But again, in animation, maybe you're not complete in your animation and there's something specific you want to show us in the storyboards or the wireframes, that's great. Or location photos, same thing. Press articles or reviews of your past work if you want to bolster yourself as an artist, or maybe there's some press already about the project that you're doing. That's really fantastic. We don't need to have actor headshots, even if you have really great, popular, important actors in your project already. You can just put them in your crew. No press kits or materials. It's just a lot of extra stuff. And again, nothing that duplicates things that you're already showing us in video. And then no DVDs. Still not taking them. Next slide.
We have a few more questions about budgets in the
All right.
chat.
Okay, let me see here. How do we include our budget's crew or cast members that would be paid if the grant is given, but are going to be in kind of, so you can, so the question here is about in-kind donations. You can choose to pay folks in kind, and like maybe their deferrals specifically. You're going to monetize that in kind, right, in your budget. So it will should show as a dollar amount, and you can reflect it as in kind, or what did I just say? That needs to be paid, right? Or a loan, things like that in your budget. But the actual amount should be calculated in your budget, what it's worth. And that's for you to decide. And what happens is a lot of the time, as independent filmmakers, we are, right? You have a budget, and that's the budget you're going for. And then you have this money that you got to make your film. And so there are going to be those decisions that you make about where the money goes and who you pay, right? Or who is going to do it in kind and who's going to do it for payment. So that's all fine. You don't have to reflect those budgetary decisions when you do your proposal. Your budget is just the film budget. This is what's going to cost to make the film, right? Does that make a lot of sense? And then what else do we have here? Any other budget? Okay, so in-kind services, still monetize those in-kind, put a value on those in-kind services. That's value, and it's going to cost somebody something. So even if it's in-kind. Basic line items for, is it okay to include basic line items for the budget summary form? Crowdfunding, lighting award. Yeah, absolutely. You tell us the things that you anticipate and where you're going to get them. You don't have to, if you can fill the budget with the few anticipated or for crowdfunding, because you can, or you are going to put it on your credit card and you are totally fine with that. Absolutely. Just doesn't have to be extensive. And then how general can estimates be for things later? They can be based off of quotes. We're not going to come back. The good thing about our fund as well is that we're not going to ask for a budget report of how you use the money at the end of the budget. There are grants and co-production agreements that will ask for that. In this case, we're not going to be asking for that. So, we know that it's subject to change. You're going to use this amount of money to basically pay off your post-production process, but maybe that production process is a lot more than you thought, or a lot less. We're not going to ask for the difference in the money if it comes in less, and we're certainly not going to give you more if it becomes more. But so estimates are totally fine. Hopefully that answered your question. All right. For if an item does not apply to our project, yeah, you can keep the row blank, or you put on non-applicable, or just show us the budget for what you need. So it doesn't have to be in any specific format. All right. So the log line, so there's asked the difference between a log line and project summary on the online application. So the log line is your catchy one sentence, usually pitch, that tells you what this film is. And sometimes the log line tells you it is it's an experimental film about this bird's journey towards self-discovery, right? That could be your log line. But it should be catchy. It should kind of explain what we're going to see. And one line, usually, sometimes it's two. And then the project summary is a little bit more description of the film itself, the project itself. Does that help? All right, next.
There's one more question regarding equipment and software. So one of the filmmakers is asking whether or not they should include software and equipment that is going to be used via the school where they teach. Should this be listed as in kind, and should the school be listed?
Absolutely, you can list it as in kind. You can credit the school, and your school will likely ask you for some kind of credit for it anyway, but yes, in kind for sure. We don't necessarily have to know the source if that's the question really, but yeah, If it's in kind, great. And just before we end, we have some time for questions for sure after, so feel free to keep adding them. But if you need help during this process, it's really important that you go to filmmaker support. So please email that email, because we are watching it for questions and concerns instead of going directly to me or Marianne or Max, and because those will just get caught up in the inbox of our regular day. So we're trying to keep everything in filmmaker support. We will get back to you as soon as we can. If you have a technical issue, same thing, go to filmmaker support. If there's a technical issue with trying to log on to the website or the application portal, or if the application portal is down for any reason, please let us know. Don't wait until the day of the deadline in the afternoon. That's when we always have website issues, because everyone's trying to submit at the same time and we can't answer your questions in real time. So that's just going to slow down the whole process. So do it as early as you can is the recommendation. And then we will announce the awards by mid-December. And the reason why we don't tell you where you are in the process is because it is a fluid process. We say we have 2 phases, but things that might be getting passed off on in the first phase sometimes resurface in the second phase if they're looking for very particular types of films, or the jurors have split decisions and we kind of decide, actually, no, we really do think this project needs to go into the next phase. So it doesn't help to tell you where you are, because actually everything's still in play until the very end. And then at that point, you can ask for feedback. And the feedback is in the form of the responses that the jurors and the reviewers give. So sometimes that feedback is a couple of lines. Sometimes it could be a paragraph or 2, depending on the reviewers. And we do curate the responses. So we do look at the responses and then the reviews, and we pull out what we think is going to be best serve you going forward, or give you an impression of how people are looking at your project. So it's not going to be verbatim. It's not going to be attributed to anybody specifically. It's just kind of a snapshot of thoughts and feelings about different aspects of your project. That could be helpful for some people. They find it helpful to know how people react to the project. Some people don't find it helpful at all. If you are one of those people who don't find feedback helpful for you, don't ask for it because it is just a couple of us trying to pull all the information. So we really want to make sure people who want it and can value it will be asking for it. Next slide should just be our deadline. So Monday, September 13th, 6 p.m. Central. Any questions before that? Absolutely. Go to filmmaker support. If you need to talk to somebody, I would just say request a meeting time at filmmaker support. We'll try to get back to you depending on what you need it for. We don't look at things ahead of time, unfortunately. So this is really the time to ask your questions if they're specific to your project. And Max, maybe you can stop recording.